Welcome to this multi-part video series where we're gonna really get to the bottom of how EOS works, the social structure, the economic model, how it functions at a very granular level. So if you know anyone at all who could maybe benefit from learning more about how EOS works as a business model as well as a protocol, then please go ahead and share this video. I've got my EOS top. I have my presentation for you, and this is just an introductory video. We'll go and do subsequent videos every 3 days, every 7 days. This is just part one, and we'll go into more and more detail as we go along. So what is DPOS, Delegated Proof of Stake? Well, essentially at its core, it is a consensus algorithm, and it will be paving the way for an economic model behind the infrastructure necessary to support, in my mind, probably the two most notable points. Zero fee transactions, because we like zero fees. The reason we like zero fees is because when mainstream adopters want to use a serious application, they don't want to buy cryptocurrency to pay for a little fee. They just want to use it, and they won't even know that they're using it. That's how mainstream adoption is going to be achieved. So millions of transactions per second with thousands of chains operating in parallel. That's thousands of EOS chains in parallel. That's groundbreaking. I couldn't actually believe it when I actually figured this one out. So these are both things that we're not going to cover in this video, but I thought it was worth just mentioning that these are some of the main benefits of what EOS can bring. So that's going to be a later video, and we're going to go on with the introduction. So 21 block producers. Each dot that you see here going round is a block producer. What is a block producer? Well, quite simply, we can think of them as miners validating blocks. Just like any other chain, you have miners which has a block, it validates it, then the transactions go through. And it happens in a sequential order in this case, where this node, delegate, miner, however you want to refer to it for now, is going to validate that block, and then those transactions, are going to go through, and it passes it to the next one, and it validates, goes round and round and round, and there's only 21. So this is an absolutely idyllic scenario where we have block producers strategically positioned to counter latency, where you don't want to be going from this block producer to this one, 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 to this one. It's gonna really slow things down. So we counter this, hopefully, by putting them in order in the shortest distance possible, while still keeping things as spread out as much as possible. A little bit idealistic there. So why not call them miners? If that's what they do. Well, there's a social component to the delegated proof of stake. So it essentially, there's a social reason. And unlike miners, it's democratic. The social reason is that they are elected. They are not just taking their expensive hardware, coming along, plugging it in, and then mining fees from the network. It doesn't work that way. They cannot just begin mining. They have to be elected by token holders, and token holders essentially control the network because they control and have great weight over block producers, and block producers run the network. They provide the storage, the bandwidth, and the RAM. So how would you elect a block producer that you like the look of? Well, you would stake your tokens, and you would then vote for the appropriate block producer. Block producers may be offering anything in terms of social benefits to the EOS community. For example, one that I think is very interesting is EOS Cafe, where they'll be looking at making cafes around the world for the EOS token to essentially benefit from and grow. That's not laid in stone because that's all subject to inflation, but let's not worry about that quite yet. That's going to be a later video. Block producers are again controlled entirely by EOS token holders. That's why we had such a long drawn out process of an ICO, because you didn't just want to sell all of the tokens in one go. Because if you did, what would happen is you would have centralized control, most likely, of tokens where the majority of people, whales if you like, would have brought them up. Whilst this kind of distribution, hopefully it's more decentralized. So if we want to add a new block producer, how are we going to do that? So let's say one gets enough votes to be among the top 21. Well, we can't just plonk him here, not because it's probably not the best location in terms of latency, but purely because we still have 21 others. And to add him would mean that there's now 22. So what we'd have to do is remove one of the others because they didn't have as many votes as this one, for instance, or they were voted out and he was the next block producer with the most votes. So one in, one out, always 21 though. So control is very fairly distributed. You see this pie chart, each one is a block producer and each one has equal weight. Is that because EOS token holders have mandated that they can not have greater hash power than each other? They can only have the same hardware and the same bandwidth and everything else? No, of course not. That would be impossible. Instead, they are just seen as delegates. It doesn't matter what their hash power is. They have equal weight on the system. It doesn't matter if this guy has as much hash power as the whole of the 21 combined. He's just a delegate and he has his say just like the rest of them. Therefore, we are much, much more decentralized because there is no big weighted parties outweighing many little ones. So Bitcoin and Ethereum, the real thing here is, how could EOS possibly compete with Ethereum and Bitcoin, etc., which have tens of thousands of nodes? We only have 21. How can we possibly be decentralized compared to these guys? And by the way, before I get into it, I have great respect for what Vitalik's done with Ethereum. It's a first mover. It's really paved the way for a lot of third generation blockchains such as EOS. So first of all, we can have hundreds or even thousands and beyond block producers in standby around the world. It's not entirely clear if they will receive some kind of dividend from inflation, which we'll cover in a later video, how the economic side works, but it's ever changing, and I understand the EOS token holders can kind of change how it might happen, but at present I think they will be receiving some kind of dividend, most likely from inflation, which will at least cover some of their costs to be in kind of a dormant standby state whilst they try and get votes to get into the top 21. That way, if one of the 21, or if there's a disaster and we lose multiple, from power cuts to regulation problems to internet outages, we can replace basically the whole 21 and beyond quite quickly if anything went wrong. But that's really not what is going to make EOS super decentralized. That's not what is necessarily going to quell the worries of Ethereum and Bitcoin maximalists. Instead, it will probably take a kind of an equal position. So This is the most groundbreaking thing that I think that I've come across about EOS, in all honesty. And that is that with thousands of chains operated in parallel, thanks to inter-blockchain communication, all pointing towards one EOS token. So that blows everything out the water times a million, quite frankly, because you can have, basically what this is saying is you can have one chain of 20 one-block producers with a few hundred standby delegates ready to jump in if they get enough votes or if something goes wrong. And then you have another chain, totally separate, another EOS chain, 21 delegates, hundreds of standby delegates. Isn't that called a fork? Aren't they two separate communities, two separate resources? The answer is no. They're all pointing towards the same chain. Okay, well, if inter-blockchain communication is able to, in EOS's case, communicate what's going on in a very efficient way, it's actually quite unique at the moment in that respect. Not many blockchains have achieved this. In fact, I'm not sure any have really. Let's scale this. Let's see where this can go. So why would you have two chains pointed towards one token? Well, you've got this small, nimble, compartmentalized structure of just like those 21 nodes with the standbys, and it runs efficiently. There's only 21 nodes. It's not like Ethereum where you have to sync with the whole network to run a full node, but it's just these 21 nodes. That's it, and it's very quick, crazy quick transaction speeds. Okay, so instead of adding more nodes, because that would slow things down, what you're doing is you're adding another network which is independent, but it still keeps the same speed. Okay, but then you add another EOS chain, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what happens if you add 1,000? Well, let's have a look. 1,000 EOS chains, each chain 21 delegates. That's 21,000 delegates, all pointing towards one chain. It's inter-blockchain communication within, or just amongst EOS in this case, as this example would portray, which means we're talking millions of transactions per second. We're talking unlimited transactions per second, because you're not saying we need a software solution, we need to develop technology, we need to do research. What you're actually saying is that, well, we just need more hardware or more chains, more of what we've already done. We just need to scale hardware. And that's a logistical challenge, of course, but that is doable 100%. So it's just a matter of time as EOS grows. Now, the real question next would be, how is this all going to be funded? And how does zero fees work? But we'll cover that in a separate video. So it's worth noting that all nodes will remain the same. So each chain, 21 block producers, each one has an equal weight as the other. There's no chain with a block producer that has all of the mining power that then can control the other chains and delegate. No, it's just equally spread. Every single chain is just equal. 21 split, 21 split, 21 split. Because actually, let's just go forward and show the example. So, unlike Ethereum and Bitcoin, as my example, again, I have great respect for what they've done. The first movers. I just think that this could be a more efficient way. So let's say this is Ethereum now. They have unequal weight. So for example, the free reds could actually have more weight in terms of their hash power and control over the network in terms of achieving a 51% attack. So the biggest miners and pools control the majority of the network. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, 1, 2, 3, 51%, 1, 2, 3, 51%. But what about the tens of thousands of nodes? I mean, what are we just going to forget about the tens and tens of thousands of nodes? Well, essentially, yeah, because these guys have more weight. I mean, look, like this one here has more weight than like everybody combined with a full node. It's crazy. I mean, obviously these are mining pools, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily going to get compromised. I'm just saying that it seems illogical to have tens of thousands of nodes, yet just a handful of pools or entities control the majority of the network. Like, what's the point? So 51% attack on Ethereum, say 3 pools. I mean, this is kind of a bit high in the sky. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it makes a very good comparison. So 3 pools of EOS, EOS, where it's not set to my knowledge at 51%, you actually need to control 2/3 of the delegates, 75%, say, which would be 14 block producers to start compromising the network. Again, a block producer gets compromised, and what happens? He gets voted out democratically, just the same way he got voted in. But presumably we'll know who they are. They have to disclose very personal information, actually, just to be in the running for an election. So the EOS democratic process, I may have jumped ahead there, but that's actually red. I'm not sure if you can tell in this light, and that's red. And let's say we've got 2 bad actors on here. And how are we going to deal with them? Well, we're going to vote them out. And how do we vote them out? Well, we've got to stake our EOS. So what we're going to do, we're going to stake our tokens, and we're going to vote out that block producer. That could take the form of simply just adding, taking away votes rather than voting out, and then replacing your token stake vote for them, the bad actor, with someone you perceive to be a good actor, and eventually they'd lose their votes and they'd drop out, and then the redundancy being the hundreds or however many block producers on standby essentially would then jump in. So as an example, we've just voted out the bad guys, and let's just say that they've now been replaced with 2 guys on the standby, and we go forwards. So the really interesting part, I think, is the economic model and how you actually get free transactions, yet you're able to pay for an immense amount of infrastructure. I'll give you a clue. It's got something to do with inflation, but I will cover that in a separate video because this is becoming slightly long, and I've actually run out of slides. I'll have to make some more. So yeah, it's coming soon, guys. I'll probably make a video every 3, 5 or 7 days, and I'll keep the series going. I'll probably make it up to maybe even 20 parts. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But again, I'd really appreciate it if you would be able to share this with anyone that is interested in blockchain technology, in particular the business side, because once we get past these videos of kind of how EOS is perceived to work from what we know from the white paper and from news updates from Block 1 and the community, I think it would be much more interesting actually to jump into DAOs, decentralized organizations, and really take a look at the business models that could come to fruition because of this new technology. So again, guys, please share this everywhere, and let's make it nice and easy for people to know what EOS is and how actually it can scale to be one of the most decentralized blockchains in the world. Thank you.